When I was a sophomore in high school, I wrote letters to every Major League Baseball franchise and every NFL PR director, asking them what it took to become a statistician in Major League Baseball or the NFL. And I received responses from probably about 75% of the baseball clubs, and still have those letters. And I was playing baseball at the time, and I wanted to find out what it would be like to have a career. What else do you have to do? To their credit, almost to the man or the woman who responded to me, it was to go to college. And once I stopped playing baseball, I came to that realization there were a lot of people much better than I was. I wanted to find another avenue to get into baseball, and went into school. I wanted to be a writer, a beat writer, and watched Ross Newhan and read Ross Newhan of the LA Times and other writers. And you know, it was kind of torn between being a writer and communications. And I was very fortunate in 1980 to get an internship with a ball club, the organization, after 3 rejection letters. And it was at that time I really determined that I didn't have the fortitude to be a writer and cover, because I came to a conclusion within my own mind that if I didn't do something and had not succeeded at doing something, I would have been hard pressed to write about the ups and downs, the failures and successes about somebody in a field that I had not succeeded in. And that was my own personal understanding. So I had communications. To this day, I've never taken a PR course, but I took journalism, communications major at Cal Poly Pomona, and a minor in journalism. And a lot of sequence of events fell in order and allowed me to start a career actually in January of 1981, full-time as a secretary in public relations. It's the 29th season, and as I sit here, I still don't feel like I've worked a day in my life. And I think if anybody can have that feeling and walk away from it, or even a large percentage or majority of your days, that you truly feel like it's a blessing and it's not really work, then they will have had a good professional aspect of their life. And that's not to say there aren't bad days or tough days. But when you go to work and you're going to work in a beautiful backyard, and you travel and you have a chance to be part of history every day, or be around history, and no 2 days are alike. That's the exciting thing about what we do. And I look at that as a blessing, I really do. When I started with the Angels, and again as the intern in '80. There were a staff of a little over 30 people. Most of those people had been in the game 15 to 20 years. So when I started, one of the lessons I was taught was kind of commitment. In fact, one of the gentlemen who hired me said, "Are you ready to make a commitment for life for the Angels, to the Angels?" You know, here it is, Major League Baseball. This is the club I'd grown up liking as a child, and to be working for them was just kind of icing on the cake. When we were owned by the Autries at the time, and I think that was the mentality of baseball in general. Then really in the mid-'80s, baseball became a business. And you've gone from $1 billion business to almost $7 billion now in 2008. But we went from the change in ownership to from the Autries to Disney, to corporate, now with Mr. Marino owning us. And I've actually had a couple younger people say to me, "Didn't you ever want to do something else in your life?" And I kind of smile when I hear that, because I think back when I was 22 years old and people saying, "You ready to do this for the long haul?" And I think that's both a change in mentality, and I think it's a change in the workplace now. I mean, I hear these stats that most people coming out of college, or most people today, will have 5, 6, 7 different jobs sometimes before they settle in something. And I don't look at that as a person that's indecisive. I look at that as the work environment, or the climate now, and I think it's very, very difficult. And that's interesting, because I would have never perceived using baseball as a stepping stone. And ironically, when we were owned by Disney and we're Major League Baseball, there were a lot of people that came to work for us, that were hired, that wanted to have Disney on their resume, not working in Major League Baseball. And that was a conflict to me. I would tell you that you could sit down and interview somebody. I don't really have an interview when I hire somebody. I have a conversation. And I've always believed that within a half hour I can ask you certain questions, look in your eye, just have this dialogue that I can tell you whether you have the passion for the game or not. And I think it's when all is said and done, you have to understand winning, you have to understand losing, you have to understand hours, you have to understand sacrifices of personal time, you have to understand commitment and loyalty to your craft, to the organization. You have to understand and accept giving up certain things in your personal life because of what the game demands. I mean, when that schedule comes out, it's 162 games in 181 days, plus your 6 weeks of spring training and everything else that goes with it. You're either part of it or you're not, and there's not really a gray area. I try to explain that to people when they say, well, what's it like being in baseball? Because you see all the great aspects and what it provides, but there's a flip side of it too, and you have to understand that flip side, I think, before you get into it. Absolutely, and I would tell you, when I talk about Major League Baseball, I'm not talking in the sense it's the most grandiose thing. I don't say it from an elitist or an arrogant perspective, but there are a lot of $6 billion companies and industries in this country and in the world. I mean, there are many industries that dwarf Major League Baseball in terms of financial definition, but in reality, there are few corporations or there are few entities that have a social impact the way baseball can or sports can. I mean, there are very few businesses that you can reflect on or look back on in a country and say that can really give a community or a region pride or hope. Look what sports did in the '80 Olympics with the hockey team. Look what the Red Sox finally winning that World Championship. Look what we did in 2002 when we won our first World Series. It was a phenomenal feeling of what it does to a community. I think the difference is the business model. Certainly there's very few, if any, that compare to sports. And we have employees who have guaranteed multi-year contracts where we work in a business where the employees, the players basically kind of determine the profit margin to a certain degree of an organization based on the union and the players' contract and this and that. But we are a business that what we do is reported in real time, day in and day out in the media and in the public. I mean, we have ESPN, we have our radio station, we have a business partner with FSN, and this applies to all teams, but everything you do is scrutinized in real time. And then you provide the forum for other people to debate it, not just the media, but now the websites and the blogs and everything else. We have this running joke in the office that if we win 5 straight, everything's good. You really don't hear from people too much, except that everybody's part of the we. If you lose 5 straight, suddenly the food is cold and the service is slow. And that's just part of it. I think one of the exciting things is, again, if you're a shareholder or stockholder from a major company, you look and you follow and you watch what's going on. You watch your stock. You try to look at various aspects of the organization. But is your club winning? Is it going to make a trade? Is somebody hurt? What's the travel schedule? Who's going to be optioned out? Are you going to release a player? There's so many things that are involved in us, and it has to do with people. You know, when we were owned by Disney, you're just so reminded that you could replace a car at Topia, you could replace a machine at the Matterhorn or whatever. But our business is people and the frailties of it. I don't know what it's like to succeed in front of 40,000, nor do I understand what it's like to fail in front of 40,000 people. You sign a guaranteed multi-year contract, promising and committing to do the best you can, which doesn't always mean it's going to result in that kind of success. And again, I use that phrase, but human frailties, it has a role in our sport. And you can't go to a human resources department, you can't go to a vice president of whatever and suddenly fix it. If a player's 2 for 35, you know, suddenly Garrett Anderson started off slow the season, and their naysayers, well, bump him out of the lineup, put somebody else in. Well, as we speak, he hit 3 home runs in the last 3 games in Kansas City. So you have to allow things to unfold, and patience is truly a virtue in our game. And it really comes down on the shoulders of a couple people, primarily our manager, which is always good leadership. Initially, the Angels came into being in 1960. Mr. Autry, Gene Autry, the singing cowboy, and really one of the greatest Hollywood names in the history of this country. I mean, when you look back at the time, he was as big as the Beatles were in his time. Mr. Autry went to the winter meetings in St. Louis trying to secure radio rights to a baseball club, and he came away with the Expansion Angels. So it wasn't his intent to go and buy a baseball club. It kind of happened. I think the other owners talked him into it. So he came up with the Los Angeles Angels, and in 1961 we played at a place called Wrigley Field in Los Angeles, and we were the expansion club and had a reasonably good season. 1962 through 1965 we played at Dodger Stadium, though historically we always call it Chavez Ravine. So the Angels were kind of the second-class citizens at Dodger Stadium. Finally, Mr. Autry looked to move the club and get his own identity, and we almost played in Long Beach, but at that time Long Beach wanted to name them the Long Beach Angels, ironically, and Mr. Autry wasn't going to go for that, so he found an area in Anaheim and actually was good friends with Walt Disney, and there was orange groves throughout the area, and they cleared some orange groves and built it in just a phenomenal place in Anaheim. And we remained the California Angels until 1996, when we became the Anaheim Angels under Disney ownership. And it went from the Los Angeles Angels in '61 to the California Angels in '66 to the Anaheim Angels in '96 to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim under Artie Moreno in 2003. Officially, that kind of came into being in 2005 with the name change. And you know, having worked for three owners, having watched one owner who spilled his life into this organization, Mr. Autry, to have to sell the organization because his health was failing and they were losing a lot of money, to sell it to the Disney company, which in 7 years did some tremendous things for us, but lost $100 million as a company, a $50–60 billion company, to coming to Artie Moreno's ownership, where we're now not only turning a profit, but we're having to pay money to the other clubs because our revenue sharing is so good. We've taken our revenue from about $120 million to over $200 million. Our franchise is valued at over $500 million. He purchased it for $183, and we now, and I think this is probably one of the things that satisfies me most, we function as a big market club, not a small or mid-market club. We're in the second biggest media market in this country. And one of the things that Artie said when he bought the club was that we're going to conduct ourselves as a big market club. And everything we've done since his purchase is go in that direction. We had about, I believe it was 13,000 season tickets. 2003, we sold over 3 million tickets for the first time in club history. And then everything took off from there. And really, we've stayed there. A lot of people would like to say, well, you know, your current situation is a result of winning a World Series in '02, and that's not entirely accurate because there's a honeymoon period after you win. But we finished 19 games out of first place in 2003. Some of the worst years in club history were the years following our times, the limited times we'd gone to postseason. So it was important. You know, we've now been we've been back 3 times, 4 times since. So it's really important to have consistency. We have a phrase in our organization, and I think this would apply in the business world too. We do not use the word compete. We just don't use it. We use the word contend. If you think about it and you break it down, compete is, you know, we expect to compete. Okay, compete kind of implies hope. We hope to be the same, to give everybody a good game. We hope to be competitive. Okay, we use the word contend because contend is a statement. By saying we expect to contend, that means by our definition, in October we will be one of 8 clubs playing in postseason. If we do not play game 163, which would be the first game of the playoffs, then we fail during the season. And that we don't need the public to say it, we don't need the media to say it, we'll say it publicly. We failed if we don't go postseason. And that's a strong statement. And that's Mike Scioscia taught us that in 2000. Coming off a bad year in '99, he said, look, I understand Tim, that you and the staff have to talk about being competitive after what happened in '99. But we expect to win. So we've changed our whole mindset and really using the word content. And it may sound like semantics, but believe me, if you apply it, if you live it the way we do, we've taken a word completely out of our vocabulary. The other thing Mike's done, and again, not to sermonize here, but it's important in our professional lives, and I kind of even apply it to my personal life. We worry about today. Whatever team we're playing tonight, we don't look at the next series. If we're playing, say, Tampa on a Wednesday and we have New York coming in on a Friday, we don't get ahead of ourselves to looking at New York. We don't worry about what the other 3 clubs in our division are doing, because all we control is taking care of our business at that time. If we do everything we're supposed to do and it falls into place, and we play a good, solid game, apply our game plan, everything comes in, we win. Nothing else truly does matter, and it takes care of itself. And that's very, very important. If you go into our clubhouse, I believe that's part of the reason we won the World Series in 2002. People forget we lost Game 5 that year 16-4. We're down 3-2. And on that plane coming back from San Francisco, I was sitting next to somebody in Major League Baseball that flew back with us, and she looked at me, she goes, "I'm so sorry for you guys. You guys have had such a great season. You've worked so hard. Everything you've done with the postseason has been phenomenal." And I looked at her and I said, "Don't worry about it. We'll get through Game 6, and there'll be a Game 7, one way or the other." And I didn't say it like I was, being a prophet, but we weren't worrying about Game 7. Game 5 was behind us. It was all about Game 6. And obviously the magic of everything that happened Game 6 is now history. But I think it serves us well. And I tend sometimes to look ahead and think in our personal and even in my professional life of how many things right now that are on my mind, or anybody who watches tapes mind, worrying about what they have to do 2 weeks from now. Okay, go 4 weeks from now. What you worried about that you have to do in 2 weeks is history. And you'll look back and say, why did I worry about it? We spend so much time worrying out as opposed to taking care of those things that are right there in your grasp right now. Things that you know you can go do something about now. And certainly you have to plan in advance and take care of some things in the future. But to be so preoccupied that you miss the present is something we really work hard on an organization. And again, I credit Mike Socia with a lot of that, because attention to detail and focus on the moment is something that we pay a great deal of attention to. Well, you try to. Now, I'll go contrary to what I just said with our owner. Artie Moreno is a visionary. And I think people that reach his status, both in accomplishment and financially, have to have just a certain different mindset. Now, what Artie will tell us is, he goes, "I know and I want you to be preoccupied with what's going on today. But in order for us to be successful, I have to look 3 years down the road. So while you want you want my responses now in the present, I'm looking down the road for that next challenge or that next step or that next revenue generator." Here's a man, I'm driving back from Arizona in spring training a couple of years or 3 years ago, and we're working on a deal with Fox Sports Net, and gone back and forth, and the deal was for $500 million for 10 years. I mean, $500 million. And he called me and he goes, "When you get home," now keep in mind I'm driving back from Arizona as it was, he goes, "When you get to the office tonight, I want you to put out a release and talk about, come up with a quote, and that we've ceased negotiations with Fox." And gave me all the reasons. Never raised his voice, never cursed anybody, never talked ill about somebody. There were some things going on, just things that will go on in business. And I put out that release that night. And within about 10 days, we had $500 million in that deal with Fox. That deal was signed. Didn't ask for a penny more, but we got the technological advances, that could earn more money, and some other stipulations in the contract that he was ultimately looking for. It wasn't a game of chicken. It was just a challenge. And I'm sitting in the truck thinking, my goodness, we're going to walk away from $500 million. He never flinched about it, and I to this day don't believe he ever sweated about it, because he knew something was going to work out. That's somebody that you learn a lot from. To the point of on our level, I believe any manager has to keep his staff focused on the present, and he or she does have to look long term. That's why we have our business plans and our budgets and everything else. And in the PR business, we talk about being proactive and reactive. Well, in our business, because of our games, a winning streak or a trade or so many things changes. And again, as I said earlier, that because we're real time, we do spend a lot of our time becoming reactive, because whatever we do today can just bring on a whole myriad of questions, things that you can't anticipate yesterday. But at the same token, you have to be proactive and sense opportunity for the future. You have to spend your time knowing the personalities. You have to try to gauge the pulse of the public in the press, which are becoming kind of one and the same. When you look at bloggers and fan forums, there's a public press now in regular journalists, and we're all going through this. What constitutes a legitimate blogger from the Register, the LA Times having a blogger? It's a great challenge to people in sports. I'm sure it's a great challenge during the presidential, the election forthcoming, who you allow access to in certain interviews and this or that. So we're all adjusting right now, and I think that's challenging for all of us. As far as leadership, I think in working with people and working with my staff, and I just have some tremendous people that I work with, but try to keep their mindset fresh. Try to keep the challenges, because a lot of what we do is, it can be Groundhog Day and doing notes and doing stats and looking things up. There's a lot of numbers. And even though that's changed with computers now, we did used to use typewriters and have to type our notes fresh, for those of you history buffs. But it's a challenge to keep everybody focused and not lose their creativity. Because one of the things, when you use computers and you write something and you have to put something out every day, it's very easy to just change something up, erase a line and add it, or just update it. And I believe not only in notes and stats, but looking ahead to try to maintain a creativity and let somebody come up with an idea or thought that we implement. Because I think nothing stirs motivation more than acceptance of an idea and input. And this is a credit again to our organization, that we'll have a staff meeting. For example, we're going to have a retro night. We're going to go back and have a 70s theme. Well, rather than just the department heads getting in on one of our weekly staff meetings and talking about it, and you have the VPs and the directors, and we have a Wednesday meeting, sometimes we'll have an offshoot meeting or a one-off meeting where we'll call, every department head will send somebody in their staff in there to meet with the senior VP or the marketing director and let them have input into it. And we just did this for the 70s night. So there were only, I think, a couple directors, and everybody else was regular staff. And what you'll see there on retro night will be a result of their thought process. So they get a chance to say, hey, look what I did, or that one's mine. So there's not an elitist view in the way we run business of only a certain people are going to dictate the direction of the philosophy and the approach to everybody else. There's a lot of youth in our organization, and it's a different time, and I think we all do a great job of marrying different ideas. One of the things you can't do to be successful, and Artie says it all the time, and obviously it's an old phrase, but nothing stays the same. Either changes for the better or changes for the worse. We tend to look at it changes for the better. If you're stuck in your ways, we're not the organization to be part of. And having been there as long as I've been there, that's one of the things I challenge to myself, is I don't live in the past, because I think it's a very dangerous thing to do. I reflect on the past. I reflect on programs and ideas that other people put forth, of things, how we resolved issues. But I'm very open-minded, and I think being an angel in 2008 is very much about being open-minded. The greatest legacy that the Disney company left us is that ballpark. and it's a ballpark, not a stadium. It's a major league ballpark and one of the best. And in fact, after this year, you'd win a bet. We are the second oldest baseball park or stadium in the American League in 2009 behind Fenway, which is really phenomenal when you look at the condition. And obviously Disney left us a world championship in 2002 as well. But they left some ideas, and they created the Rocks in left center field, which is phenomenal, the kids area. Part of that's understand the psychology. When I went to a ball game years ago with my father, if that game lasted 4 hours, I was thrilled to death. You know, you didn't look at how much you pay and how long you're there, because I think we had time as a society. We had that afternoon or that evening to go out. You know, people weren't buying a lot of season tickets then, so you had people who just went to games. But God, if I could be at a ballpark for 4 hours, it was phenomenal. Now we play 3 hours and people are complaining games are too long. And you had to find things to keep your kids busy. I think it's more family oriented. So we really appeal to that. We also do things out there where we try to show youngsters that those players that they're seeing on the field were their age at one time. And we have games, where the parents can enjoy it with their kids out there. One of the things that we're very proud of is that ESPN magazine on a national poll voted again this year, and I think it was 80,000+ people, that we were the #1 baseball club in Major League Baseball in terms of the overall fan experience. And that's several factors from affordability, cleanliness of ballpark experience, ownership, commitment to winning, chances of winning, you know, a whole myriad of categories. We're very proud of that because, like we like to say, is when you come to our ballpark, I can't sit here and we can't sit there and guarantee you a win. But we can guarantee you, short of whatever the result is on the field, you're going to have a safe time in a clean environment in a family experience. And I think you look around, the diversity is greater than ever before at our ballpark. I think we appeal to the baseball fan. And I'm probably skipping ahead a little bit, but one of the things that's come up is you have a Hispanic owner. You know, already said it from the outset, he's very proud of his culture and his heritage, but he considers himself an American, and our appeal is to baseball fans. You know, whatever creed, color, denomination, whatever, baseball fans, and that's what we try to sell. What's interesting is that we've been asked that question, and having been there through different periods of time. I remember when it was we were lily white Orange County. You know, that was a phrase, and we didn't have enough African Americans on the club. There has never been a discussion, and I was the assistant general manager for 4 years with the organization. We've never had a discussion in player personnel that we need more of. You know, whether it's a Latin player or African American player or an Asian player, never had the discussion. We need to fill a position with the best qualified or best available player. And that's how we have maintained ourselves. There's never been a mandate from Artie to go out and sign Vladimir Guerrero or Bartolo Colon because they were Latin players, that we needed to do something. The cultural discussions have really been how we evolve with the change in the game. When you look at the breakdown, I think it's 34-36% now of the game is Latin players. And that's different. So how it's more not so much an appeal to the public or how we make things change. It's, you know, we have trilingual signage around the ballpark. We have Japanese, Spanish, and English, but it's really within our own system how we teach people coming over from Venezuela or Colombia or whatever. 16, 17-year-old kids who come to the minor leagues, or an 18, 19-year-old kid that we sign. Suddenly we stick them in Mesa, Arizona, and you know, to get ready to be a major league ball player, to go through that training. Well, the food's different. You're driving. There's laws here that there aren't there. Our diversity issues are almost more internal than they are external, and we work very hard at them. We provide English classes to our players in the minor league system because a lot of focus from the public as well is at the major league level. But we have 160 kids in the minor leagues. You know, of that, maybe 10, 12% will ever sniff the major leagues. So a lot of it is training people and also preparing them a little bit for the rest of life. When you can't guarantee, and it's a choice we all make, our fields and our careers, but sometimes you'll have that kid that he maybe played 3-4 years in the minor leagues. He comes over from a Latin American country. He's not going to school now. It's just to play baseball, and he doesn't make it. Okay, what's he going to do? You know, some stay here in this country. Some go back. I think we take it very serious. There's another responsibility beyond just producing baseball players, but to produce people and try to prepare them moving on, because there's a lot of parents, and this may sound almost melancholy, but there's a lot of parents who entrust an organization with their young son, and you hope that they prepare them for something else than just on the field. And I think that's a responsibility. I mean, when you turn your son over or daughter now over to the military at a young age, it's not just what they might be doing now, but they're learning a craft. Plus they have school, hopefully, to fall back on. When we sign players, school is part of that program. They can always go back to school and we pay for it. So, and I know that's kind of skipping around, but that's one of the things that I've always felt very important. I don't think people understand enough that we do try to look out for the overall best interest of the person. Because once you take that uniform off, there's a lot of people that would like to employ, they like to hear the war stories of a ball player and be around, but that person's going to fit back into society. And maybe they made millions of dollars, you still have too much time, but employers are still looking for that training of the mind and that training of a craft and that training of education, because you can't get by the rest of your life talking about positioning of a hitter or what you did in Boston in September of '02 or something like that. And it's very, very important. And a lot of players go back for training or to finish their education. I think it's the most important thing we do. We're not going to win a World Series every year. We play 6 months of the year, hopefully 7 if we play in October, but we are an entity of 12 months. That ballpark is open and our organization's functioning, as are the Ducks, the Lakers, the Dodgers. We're a entity in a business that has a social responsibility. We have resources. I've always said that the greatest aspect of a ball player is not the talents he has, but it's the impact he has being a Major League Baseball player. I've taken players, literally taken players to Children's Hospital and had doctors come out and say that was medicinal. That visit was medicinal. Okay, that's an impact. We make dreams come true. And I don't say that as Disney or trying to be, you know, a lot of the things we do, we don't publicize, because that's ultimately true charity. We have a social responsibility. Most of us go out speaking. We do reading programs with kids. Our owner gave $500,000 to an academy in Compton, inner city baseball academy. He's Boys and Girls Club's one of our charities of choice. The cystic fibrosis. We do a lot of hospital visits. We have a partnership with Memorial Care. So our players get out there. We do a lot of things at the ballpark. We bring people in. I've got an 11-year-old with leukemia that's going to come in actually during this next homestand. Nobody's going to know about that. I'm going to introduce them to a couple players. Boom. So that's important, and I would tell you that it's probably one of the satisfying aspects of the job, because we're so associated with winning and losing. Now, if we lose 100 games this year, we're going to do the same things in the community that we did when we won a World Series. It doesn't change anything. Now, it may change the perception. I mean, where the fans are, you know, more focused on winning than losing. But at the end of the day, I think it's almost the same way as we live our life. It's, you know, when that final expiration date comes, I don't think anybody's going to talk about our bank account, you know, and our won-loss record or whatever you did. They're going to talk about what kind of person you were and your good deeds. And I think for our organization, when all is said and done at the end of the day, to be accepted as the #1 franchise for what we provide our fans, first in a poll we know, and then all the feedback we get for the difference we make in the community and the testimonials we get, that's what you take to the bank. The memories and experiences that we create in people, for people, can never be replaced. Talking to people. It really does. I try to avoid human resources if you can. And with all due respect, it's very, and I understand liability, I understand rules and regulations and protecting and all that, but to me, I just believe that a very straightforward conversation with people, there's no substitute for it. We're becoming more and more insulated, isolated, you know, whatever. I sit there and laugh even in the workplace. I know it's quick, but think of just how silly it is that you're sending an email to the person right next door to you or the cube next door to you. You know, that one sentence, hey, can you? As opposed to poking around the corner and saying, can you? You know, because we're so machine oriented. And I know that's the way it is, but there's still no substitution for communication. And when you think about everything that goes on, and I can say this because I'm not a marketing major or an accountant or whatever, but everything you do, you know, the basis of our foreign policy or domestic policy on you know, a global scale of our relationships, you know, with our family or our loved ones or whatever, it's still communication. There's no shortchanging talking, and there's no shortchanging listening. And you can come up with whatever machine that we will create from here to eternity, it will never substitute interpersonal relationships. And in that interpersonal relationship are actions, and as you said, traits. And people, we're judging people. We're profiling each other to say how you respond, how you act. No textbook will ever teach you how to make that work. And you have to have that ability. And if you're going to be a leader, you're going to talk to people. People want to be leaders for different reasons. You know, some just have tremendous talent, some are driven by the money, some are driven by the power, whatever it might be. But you're going to have to talk to somebody. And if you can't, you may not ever become that leader, or your tenure will be short-lived. The hardest thing for me is to say no. And by nature, again, by the nature, I think, of our position, public relations, communications, community relations, we're kind of problem solvers. We try to come up with resolutions. We're trying to fulfill dreams, fulfill requests. I mean, that's basically what I spend so much of my day doing. And it's hard to tell somebody no, because personally I take that almost as a failure. Probably more times than not, the toughest thing is having to explain why we can't do something, or have to explain a budget reduction, or why the club does things. And you always try to remind people that as a management person, I don't believe it's our responsibility to inform the rank and file of everything that's discussed on the management level. I believe it's part of our responsibility to take a bullet at times, or protect them, because I think you have to protect morale. I can sit in a staff meeting and understand completely why we're going to pull this line item out or whatever. Maybe I disagree with it, but I understand that that's the way the organization's going to do it now. Well, I don't need to get the rest of my staff riled up and worry about it. They need to stay focused. Okay, so you need to present it to them, and I think you have to use a little psychology. When you know people are going to be upset about something, try to put yourself in their shoes and then say, what's a viable explanation to soften this? Or what don't they need to know? You know, let them stay focused. I'm a firm believer that leadership and responsibility of my staff, if somebody in my staff messes up, it's my responsibility. So when my president or my owner asks me about it, or senior vice president, how did this happen, or how could this happen, I take full accountability for it. Now, I'll deal with it within my department. Okay? But if you're a leader, that's part of your responsibility. Because when the credit goes around, you know, a lot of times ownership may not, I'm not saying that's the case necessarily in our organization, but a lot of times credit may be given at the higher level when the lower level is doing it. And I think you have to, every time I get a thank you note or an email saying so-and-so did something, I always send it to Artie, I always send it to our club president from that person. You know, want to let you know what Matt did, want to let you know what Eric did. Because I think you just kind of drill home and reinforce the fact that everybody is contributing, everybody's serving a role, and everybody is being acknowledged for doing some good things. One of my dear friends, probably one of my best friends, is Bill Bavasi, the general manager of the Seattle Mariners, who hired me as the assistant general manager when he was here. And one of the things I've always said about Billy is he takes credit for nothing and responsibility for everything. And to me, not because it's for me, but that to me is one of the ultimate compliments you can give a leader. And you know, we kind of function in our department that the perks and the bennies and all the other things start from the bottom up. Okay, my secretary, you get the shirts, you get the tickets, you get some of the things that come along with it. Start with them. That's management taking care of them, because it's not all money. It's recognition. It's saying thank you. We were skipping around when we send emails back and forth to each other. If I ask somebody to do something, they say handle whatever. You always send a thank you back. You do a follow-up. You just don't throw out commands and barks and expect it to be done and not acknowledge it thereafter. And that's a philosophy within, I think several of the people I work with function that way, but I know I do 100% of the time. Loyalty, dedication, common sense. I'm not a road scholar. Don't profess to be the smartest bear in the woods. I mean, I've worked with people that's intelligence have just soared by me, but I've yet to work with anybody whose passion for the Angels has surpassed me. Common sense. You know, the old phrase, it's not that common. I believe in that. I really believe that I have the ability, and I don't say this with any arrogance, to recognize the situation, try to evaluate it quickly, and come up with a resolve to do the right thing. Okay, and I think that's one of the traits. I try to fix things. If I see two people, you know, there's a conflict, I try to resolve that conflict if I see two parties that won't, because I don't believe we move forward as an organization until you do. Compassion and understanding. I've functioned in trying to put other people up on a higher level at first. What if I met you for the first time at a social function and we talk about this program? Before you really knew what I did, I would know what you do, and I would ask you 10, 15 questions. Not because I'm really not interested, but I am interested. Okay, and then when the conversation comes back around to me, you're going to be interested, because one of the things we don't do anymore, I don't believe, is we don't take the time to truly get to know people. I mean, truly try to get to know them in the time that we have during the day. And that old phrase that are we listening or are we waiting for our turn to talk? And as I've gotten older, I'm a much better listener than I was early on, and I was taught by some good people. You know, one of the first bits of advice I was given was look, listen, and observe. Nowhere in there was a talk. It was look, listen, and observe. And I've heeded that advice. And now in my position, yeah, I have to talk, and as I'm doing this, I'm talking a lot. But those traits have served me well. And to be understanding, and to not jump to conclusions, because it's very easy to do that. I try to get both sides. I've had to deal in numerous conflicts where somebody's coming to my office and he said, she said, or this just happened in the clubhouse, or the writer told me something, or the player said something about the writer. Well, I know who I have to protect, and I know who I report to, but that still doesn't replace what are the facts, what really happened, and get to that. So again, I get back to trying, probably the best thing is to be a good listener. Part of being in my role, and anybody that's like that, one of the most difficult things you have to do is sometimes deliver information or an honest opinion to your bosses that they may not want to hear. What is a pulse? Okay, when we talked about the name change and all the things that went on there, it didn't take a rocket scientist to say that we were going to be bashed. But how badly were we going to be bashed? What's the damage? You have to ask questions. You have to be able to read your audience, which is the public, which is the media, when you make certain decisions. You can't be hesitant to say, yes, but, or what about, or this might, or I wouldn't, or I'd be careful of, or have we considered. You have to say those things. You know, the most challenging PR person in this country is a press secretary for the president, and I don't care who the president is at the time. That's live television. We've gotten to know Ari Fleischer through the years and had some great conversations with him and talked about how challenging it was because a person in that role doesn't know everything. As I said here, I don't know everything in our organization, but I have to go out and answer the questions. So I better know enough about a number of things to be able to answer and then guide you or direct you for specifics. Okay, now that's easy to do for a corporate PR person. It's challenging, but when you have to go on live television and you can affect foreign policy or domestic policy or the perception or reputation of a political figure, that's a very dangerous and treacherous position, of which all of them that do it are phenomenal. But I watch those press conferences. I learn from those press conferences, not the issues, but the presentation. And it's helped me. I always, and I try to say this, and I would say this to management people going on, everybody can focus on your strengths. We all do. But it takes the stronger person to work on your weaknesses and continue to improve those, enhance your strengths, build on your weaknesses. I know what my weaknesses are. I continually try to work on them. I think some of the most successful people that I've encountered in my business, in my industry, are ones who started at the bottom. They have a complete understanding of the base of the iceberg, not the tip of the iceberg, but the base of the iceberg. Because without that base, without that rank and file across the board in the various departments, there is no tip of the iceberg. I mean, that's a fallacy. When you look at the major leagues, when you look at Anaheim, Anaheim doesn't exist if we don't have Tempe, Arizona, our minor league system, our scouts, our player development people, our trainers. It just simply doesn't exist, or doesn't exist successfully. So, you know, I think it's particularly rewarding when you can walk into a corporation from another corporation and take over. But take that time to know the people that meet your public, that meet your clients, that meet your buyers, the people that are going to interact. You're the decision maker. You have the ultimate responsibility, certainly. But the morale that you can build by having an understanding on a recognize you name basis. And I know people will walk into companies with 1,000 people. It's not always practical, but any kind of interaction serves you well. Give them the perception, if not perception, the truism that you understand the whole company. It's just vitally important. If you watch Artie Moreno, when he walks in the Diamond Club, he goes in the kitchen and shakes hands with the guys in the Diamond Club kitchen. He knows a grounds crew. He's gone out in the Club Rock, out in the rocks, and had a beer with them. Okay, all those types of things. It's very, very important to not put yourself up on the highest of pedestals at all times. I just don't believe that you have the right to demand respect individually because you have the power position. You have the right to demand respect for the position, but the individual, you still have to earn it. And your employee has to earn it too. It goes both ways. When you're in the workplace, whether you're a leader, whether you're growing into being that leader, if you can establish a mentality that I have, and it works for me, is I go to work every day thinking I have to prove myself. Every single day. And I've had 3 owners. And each one of those owners, I'm in a high profile position, so it's very easy to say, move them out. Okay? I don't take anything for granted. And one of the worst things you can do, and we actually just had to let a marketing intern go this year because of that, he said the deadly phrase, "That's not my job." Don't ever do it. Don't think it if you need to, but don't ever express it. And make everything part of your job. Okay, you'll grow. You'll grow quicker, and that ascent will be at a much quicker level than others who have that type of mentality. One thing I would say, and I try to say this to all the college kids or anybody you speak with, is don't take rejection in pursuit of your dreams or your goals as a setback. I think it's more a challenge. And in this day and age, when you're going after something now, where I used to, in my time, in the 20s, I could walk into a business and drop off that resume and have a chance to meet with somebody and let them evaluate me and see me. And now it's so interpersonal, it's difficult. So you have to stay after it. And again, I have 3 rejection letters in 1980 to be an intern. And that's quite a few years ago, obviously. But I didn't take it personal because they didn't know me and I didn't know them. But I know I wanted to be in that profession. So, you know, it's up to you, because I think you have to function under the thought process that there's 1,000 people after the job that you're seeking. You have to differentiate yourself or distinguish yourself from that, and you have to get in, and that's very important. The other thing is when you conduct yourself in the workplace, and again, this is for some very special people that are watching this, I understand that. You never know who your next boss is. You never know. Now, I say that to an intern in our organization who will be there from January to December, sitting in the press box, running game notes and delivering boxes of books down to certain places. You never know who's watching you and who you may do that one gesture or that one act that's going to open a door for your future. So if you keep that in mind, that you don't know, you know, that person may be out there, how do you want to conduct yourself? Do you want to impress that person? Well, you're trying to impress somebody you know that doesn't exist. So therefore, throw all those other traits and let them be happening and part of your personality at all times. You know, I watched it happen in our human resources department. That, you know, you have the MySpace and Facebooks and all the other things right now. Well, that's as good as writing a resume for some employers, because all you have to do is find that one wrong thing that's written or that one wrong picture that's out there. Be careful about enjoying yourself, and we all have done it, in the present to hurting yourself in the future. Take care of your tomorrow today. Don't think taking care of your tomorrow means just the future. It's very much the present.